Hello there. On behalf of all of us at Kensington, I want to welcome you to the service. We're so glad you're here with us today, whether that's in person or online. If we haven't met, I'm Jenny Warnes, Discipleship Director at the Birmingham campus, which I just have to mention will be officially reopening for in-person services on May 2nd. Woohoo! Right now, I want to invite you to a couple upcoming opportunities. The first is baptism. We're so grateful to be able to offer on-site baptism at all campuses on May 2nd. It's less than a month away. We just celebrated the resurrection of Jesus on Easter and how he's calling all of us into new life. Baptism is the perfect way to demonstrate new life and keep the celebration going. When I was baptized, I'd been a follower of Jesus for a long time, but it was a pivotal moment in my faith journey as I surrendered some significant areas of my life that I'd been holding on to. Baptism was my public declaration of my trust in Jesus and his power to transform me. So, if you felt a stirring, a tug, a desire to demonstrate your commitment to follow Jesus, this might be your time. Don't delay. Go to kensingtonchurch.org/baptism for more information and to register. There's nothing like that moment, coming up out of the water, declaring that you're a follower of Jesus and have new life in him. The other event I want to invite you to is online next Sunday evening, April 18th. It's another Faith in the Family event with the one and only, or do I say two and only? Well, it's Dave and Ann Wilson. For Justin and me as parents, some of the best intentional ideas and parenting hacks came from Dave and Ann. So I'm thrilled to have them coming back to share their parental wisdom with us from their brand new book, No Perfect Parents. No one is perfect, but it is perfect timing all the way around. We're in our new series, The Family, here at Kensington this month. Their book is hitting shelves soon, and on the home front, we could really use a bit of encouragement right about now. Any other parents out there agree? So, put a reminder in your phone for April 18th at 8:30 p.m. and register now for this free online event at kensingtonchurch.org/faithandfamily. We're starting our new series today, The Family. Coming through the stress of this last year, our families have been stretched like never before. And that stretching has produced some beautiful moments, but also some very painful and broken moments. So this series is about experiencing the transforming and restorative power of Jesus in our families. So, let's lean in and see what God has for us today. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Tracy Hinkle. I'm the Discipleship Director here at the Clinton Township campus, and I just want to welcome you, whether you're sitting here in the auditorium with me or you're viewing online. We are so glad you're here. And if you're a first-time visitor, maybe you've snuck in here a few times and you're ready to ask some questions and find out a little bit more about Kensington and who we are and what we believe, you just go out to the hub in the lobby. Right in the middle, there's volunteers there with bright orange shirts on, and they're there to answer questions and welcome you and just meet you, so you have a familiar face and people that you know. And speaking of familiar faces, you probably noticed that there were some people opening the doors or inside the auditorium, and those are our volunteers who serve on Sundays. Not every Sunday, but every other Sunday sometimes, or once a month Sunday. It's very flexible, and each week we're highlighting different serving teams that we need help in. And our usher greeters are one of those teams. So if you're that kind of person where you just like to smile and be a part of making people feel welcome here, we'd love for you to join our usher greeter team. And then we also have our Kensington Kids program. And you know, the kids program, we put a lot of time and effort into that because we know if you've got small kids and you can leave them in a place where they're having a blast and you can come in here and listen, it just is a really great experience for you too. You're not worried about your kids. And the volunteers back there, they do all different kinds of things. You don't have to be the Sunday school teacher to volunteer at Kensington Kids. We just love you to open the door, play with them, make sure they're not running out and all up and down the hallways. Like, there are so many different ways to be a part of our kids program. So you can go online and check out on the volunteer, kensingtonchurch.org, I think, volunteers, /volunteers. We could really use your help. And I guarantee you one thing, you are going to be blessed by joining these teams. And how do I know that? Because I used to lead these teams, and I would meet people that were so nervous about connecting and volunteering. They felt like, oh my gosh, they're going to ask me to volunteer all the time. Not true. And they made friends, and Kensington starts to feel like, oh, I know that person, not just walk in, sit in the auditorium, and leave. So we encourage you to consider being a part of our volunteer teams. It's a lot of fun. And speaking of K-Kids, they put on some of the funnest events. The next one they have coming up is a road rally. Any road rally fans out here? They are so much fun. And right now, with all that's going on in our world and COVID spiking, this is a way to go out and have some fun next Sunday from 1:30 to 3:30. So after church, you're in your cars. You don't have to get out. It's safe social distancing. And they just have a really great road rally plan. And so I think we could all use a little fun right now. So check that out online. And then more things for kids, Kaleo Kids. Kaleo Kids is our very unique, one-of-a-kind arts program here at Kensington, where kids are learning how to act, they're learning how to dance, they're learning how to sing, all while learning a little bit more about Jesus. And for the spring, we have 2 ways that kids can be connected. They can join online, virtually through Zoom. Can you imagine an arts program that can be done virtually? Well, we figured it out. Or socially distanced in person. So you can find out more information about that online too. So now, as Jenny was saying in the video, we are kicking off the first week of our family series. And back from our Easter teaching last week is Cliff Johnson. He was formerly the lead teacher at Birmingham, and now he's a central teacher. So that means he goes from campus to campus to campus to teach. So we get to enjoy his teaching today. He is just a lot of fun, a lot of energy. I love his sense of humor. I know you're going to love it. So we're going to continue on by starting off today with, not starting off, we already started it, but a song called Family. And I just want to challenge you. There's just no way you can sit still, so don't try. This is a really fun song. Enjoy.
Singing in the kitchen, family. Running through the yard, family. Going on a vacation, family. On the credit card, family. We're all in this together, family. We're taking our pants, family. Like birds of a feather, family. Take off your shoes and dance. To the city, family. Laughing in the rain, family. It ain't always pretty, family. Can drive you insane, family. We got the keys to the kingdom, family. Take it all our car, family. Family. Well, bless your heart. Can't lose them. We all have a song to sing. Crazy, some are amazing. All got a little bit of everything. Family, sons and daughters. Family, like a photograph. Family, baptized in the water. Family, put me on the map. We're all in this together, family. We're taking a chance, family. Like birds of a feather, family. Kick off your shoes and dance. Kick off your shoes and dance. Kick off your shoes and dance.
What a great song. I love that. Wow. It's got a great groove to it. You know what my mind went to right away was growing up and going on road trips with my family. Okay, anyone else grew up in the 1980s? Please tell me I've got some people in this room. All right, great. All right, so back in the 80s, it was a different experience to take a road trip. Like now, I've got my wife and my 3 little girls. By the way, let's just throw that picture up right away. These are my 3 little girls. They're really cute and beautiful, and that's Lily on the far right. She's 11. That's London on the far left. She's 9, and that's Harley in the middle, and she's 5. And so when we go on road trips as a family now, we've got a minivan. You know what? It's fine. It's fine. It's not what I dreamed of, but it's happening. And the second row of seats in the minivan, it reclines, and then leg rests come out and extend. And there's a widescreen video monitor. I'm like, you kids have no idea what road trips were like in the 1980s. There were station wagons All right, and see if you're with me on this. The back row by the back door was a fold-up row that faced backwards. And no one ever still has found a seatbelt back there, ever. They're buried, permanently locked in the gears. And then that back window would open so you can breathe a steady dose of carbon monoxide while sitting in traffic, just to get you ready for your long trip. I'm like, this was the life that we lived. I mean, I think about my family. We would take these road trips, and we would go on long vacations. And, we had like a sedan for a long season. I remember driving to Florida 24 hours from New Jersey. 24 hours, and I would legitimately, all we had with us were books and a Walkman. Now, I'm just telling you, Walkman in the 80s, any Walkman people out there? Okay, so cassette, I'm talking cassette, not Discman or mini disc or the iPod world. I'm talking cassette tapes. And you ever think about AA batteries, like AA Energizer batteries in the 80s were like Bitcoin is now. It was like when you discovered it, your life was like, oh my goodness, where did all these batteries come from? You would hoard them and hide them. But my goodness, I would lay on the floor over that hump in the back seat and just sleep over that. It's crazy. When I think about my childhood, I think about my dad and kind of who he was. My dad loved to laugh. He loved comedies. And so I want to ask you, as we think about this message where we're going today, this family series, today we want to look at the Father. I want to look at your dad. And so when I do that, I want to ask you one question. The question is, how would you describe your dad? How would you describe your dad? So for me, again, that high-pitched laugh when he would get going and he made these funny voices. On Saturday mornings, we would go together. I was his youngest son. Hey, here's my family. Hi, sweetie. Welcome. Welcome. It's good to have all of you guys here. I'm not embarrassing you at all. I love I almost said all three of you. There's 4 of you there, and I love all 4 of you. But my dad would have me go with him on Saturday mornings to Blue Ridge Lumber. And when I say have me, he would get me out of bed. Like I wanted to sleep. But he would drag me out to do these projects, and we would go, and I would go with him because sometimes he'd take me to the arcade, and I'd play Spy Hunter in the arcade or these other, like Defender and some of these 80s games. But I remember spending all this time with my dad. He was smart, he was successful, he was super hardworking, he loved my mom. But when I think about, okay, good. You hear that beeping sound? Does anyone else use Find My iPhone like 5 times a day? Okay, we use that a lot, and I thought that was actually me. I'm wearing my iPhone watch thingy here, which talks back to me. If I say the word seriously, it answers back because it thinks I'm saying Siri. Okay, good. So anyway, my dad, though, was a great guy. But you know what I noticed the older I got? I noticed that he had some wounds and he had some pain. He had some things he was struggling with because he spent time in Vietnam. He was drafted. He was married. He got drafted because we didn't have kids yet. And that definitely affected him. It definitely created some hurt in his life and in his mind. What's interesting to think about is that there's something about the word father that's significant because the word father is the word that's used the most, that Jesus used the most to refer to God the Father. He could have used a lot of different terms. Could have called him coach, could have called him general, could have called him master, could have called him boss, a lot of different things, but chose the word father. In fact, Jesus referred to God the Father, pater in Greek, over 165 times. In fact, that word for father is used in the New Testament over 400 times. So it's a very commonly used word. In fact, even in what we call the Lord's Prayer in Matthew 6:9, when the disciples asked Jesus how to pray, teach us how to pray, this is what he says. This then is how you should pray. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Even in the addressing of our prayers, Jesus taught his disciples to see God as a father. Now that can create some challenges, can't it? Because how we view our fathers affects how we view God as a father. How we view our fathers on earth can affect how we view God as a father. Just think about that for a second. Some of you had a warm and loving dad. Kind, compassionate, funny. Well, that affects how you view God. Others of you may have had a dad who was more cold and distant. That also has shaped a bit how you view God the Father. Maybe there's some barriers there and you haven't even thought through it yet, but there's been a separation or coldness. Or maybe for you, your dad was always in your corner and a huge encourager, so you've seen God the Father as that amazing encourager of life. But others of you feel like there was a sense where your dad was you could only please him if you were winning, if you were getting promoted, if you got good grades, if you looked a certain way. And that's affected how you love and serve God the Father. You carry this sense it's like you've got to do more, you've got to try harder. You're never good enough, you're never enough for him. It's amazing to think how much our earthly fathers can actually shape our view of God as a father. Jesus takes time in his earthly ministry to tell us an incredible story about what a perfect father looks like. About a perfect father. And it's a story of a father and his two sons. Now this story has it all. If this was being written now, it would be a Netflix limited series that we'd all want to binge watch right away. It's got money, it's got inheritance, gossip, broken family, prostitution, lies, everything that you would want in a show. I mean, not that any of us would watch that, but everyone out there maybe would watch that. But before we get into that story, I want to invite us all during this time to receive our offering. And so for those of you that have been attending Kensington for a long time, this is the part of the service where we just take a pause and we recognize everything we have is from God. He's given us the ability to work and to earn money. All the stuff we have, Psalm 24:1 says, the earth is the Lord's and everything in it. It all belongs to God. And so we want to be generous and give back to the one who's given everything that we have to us so generously. But we want to invite those of you who haven't taken that step of faith and giving yet and stepped into that world of trusting God with your finances. We've created ways for you to give. First of all, you could text the word Kensington to 77977 and follow the prompts. You can go through our Kensington app, which is very quick and easy to do. You can do what my wife and I do and go through kensingtonchurch.org/giving and set up recurring gifts, or you can write a check and mail it to Kensington Church, or you can drop it in one of our buckets here. Thank you so much in advance for your generosity. We believe it's part of our discipleship, part of how we grow in our faith, to trust God with our finances and to give back to him. So, back to the story. Jesus tells a story of a father and his two sons. Now, typically this story has been given a name. It's called the prodigal son. Now, if you even look at culture, our culture today, I believe there's even a TV show right now called The Prodigal Son. Someone calls someone prodigal. It's like, man, that's a term that's well known even now. And it all came out of this story told 2,000 years ago by Jesus. And in Luke chapter 15, which is where we're going to go, Jesus tells this to an audience. And this wasn't the typical audience. This audience that was listening to him were tax collectors, prostitutes, sinners, people outside of the accepted religious world that he was supposed to be a part of. But he told stories and he preached in such a way that brought them close, where they listened intently to what he had to say. At the same time as he told these stories that brought the people who were lost close to him, it pushed back some of the religious elites that didn't like to be talked to that way and didn't like that the sinners were listening. So, Luke chapter 15 is where we are. And so in Luke chapter 15, verse 11, here's where the story starts. Jesus continued, there was a man who had two sons. The younger one said to his father, "Father, give me my share of the estate." So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in the whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. Now, as we jump into the story, what I want to tell you is it's important to understand what this story that Jesus told meant to the original audience. Because just like I'm talking to you about station wagons from the 80s and about TV shows and Netflix, I'm dropping cultural nuggets up here that we all understand because we live in a certain time and place. Well, Jesus does the same things when he tells stories called parables. He's dropping in cultural nuggets that everybody in the room would understand. So as I want to teach this to you today, I want to bring out as many of those nuggets for us to understand today so that you get what the original audience would have gotten. And the first thing you see here is that this son does something unthinkable, unimaginable. According to an incredible scholar named Howard Marshall, this younger son would have been about 17 years old when this whole story happens. Anybody make a really bad decision when they're 17 years old besides me? Okay, a few, great. Girls, that's not permission. Okay. So a man had two sons. The younger one said to his father, "Father, give me my share of the estate." So he divided his property between them. So what is this son asking his dad? Now, anyone who's got a father or a mother, you understand how inheritance works. What needs to happen before you get your inheritance? Somebody has to die. Sorry to be morbid, but that's true. So what was this younger son saying to his dad? He's essentially saying to him, drop dead. You're dead to me. Just give me my money so I can go and live the life I want. Now here's what's interesting. The first century audience is hearing this going, oh, this son, this dad is going to give it to him. He's going to drag him out in the public square, get the whole neighborhood out, and they're all going to watch as this dad gives him the beating he deserves. Sorry, but that's, again, first century culture, different than now, but that's what was expected. But what happens next is equally shocking because it says that the father divided his property between them. So what that means is that the father had two sons. The younger one says, hey, give it to me. Not only does the dad say yes, but the older brother is now in the room. And the older brother allows this to happen. And so according to Mosaic law, if you had two sons, the older son would get a 2/3 share of the estate, and the second born would get 1/3, and everybody else would get 0. They would hope to get a job someday from their older brothers. That was how it worked. And so when the father divided his estate, the older brother's standing there, and he actually gets his 2/3 share as well. And what would have been shocking to the first century audience is that the older brother should have said, hey, Dad, can you leave the room? I need to talk to my little brother Billy here for a while. You go outside. And he would go, are you insane? You need to apologize to Dad. You can't talk to him like that. Are you crazy? You know how bad you hurt his feelings? You need to ask him for forgiveness. We got to put this family back together. This is a big deal. The older brother should have stepped in immediately and ended this. Told his 17-year-old immature brother, enough. Tell Dad you're sorry so we can move forward as a family. The silence of the older brother was as shocking to the audience as the words from the younger brother, because the older brother let it happen. So what happens? So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had and set off for a distant country and squandered his wealth. Now what's interesting is, this was an agricultural society. So what he inherited wasn't just a check. It wasn't like that. It was a share of the property. It was land, it was cattle, it was all of that kind of stuff. And in that time, financial transactions of any kind took a long time, a lot of negotiating, a lot of paperwork, a lot of legalese. And so for the son to take his 1/3 share of his living father's estate and somehow liquidate it into cash in a few days, guess what he had to do? He had to go to the pawnbroker. It's the same idea as you inherit a bunch of jewelry from grandma and you don't want to get it cleaned and appraised and listed properly and get full ask for it. You go, I need money now, and you run down to hardcore pawn and you get what you can for it and you take your money and you run. So he does that. He goes and invites someone else to pay him for this future share. He takes his money and essentially runs to Las Vegas to try his luck in another country. That's basically what he did. The land he went to was a Gentile area called the Decapolis, 10 Gentile cities on the other side of the Sea of Galilee, where a young Jewish boy like that would never, ever go. And here he wanted to go and blow through his life savings, his dad's life savings. So he does that. He blows through it. And now look what happens. It says, Siri just told me that's not nice. I agree. That was actually pretty insightful. I'm going to take this off, though, because that was really weird. Spiritual warfare from Apple. I guess it was inevitable. Okay. They know everything, right? Okay. So what happens next? So after he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country who sent him to his fields to feed the pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. So he blows through his money, and then a famine comes in, and he's thinking, well, I can have fun with all this money, and then I'll get a job, and I'll earn a living, and I'll make a new life here. Well, isn't that funny how everything turned on him? He blows through his money, famine comes in, there's no farm jobs, especially for a 17-year-old Jewish kid in a Gentile world. He's a total outsider. So what does he do? It's interesting. It says that he went and hired himself out to a citizen. The Greek there actually means glued himself, clung to him, was like that house guest that won't leave, where they're not getting the hint. You're like, well, look at the time. It's time to go. Okay, I'm cool. Yeah, I'll just hang out. You're like, no, you're not going to hang out. You need to leave. Like, we do that now. Like, at some point, Dad walks down and is like, seriously, the lights are off, the door's locked. You need to be outside, okay? But in this culture, hospitality was such a high value, they would never kick somebody out. So what they would do is they would think of, what can I do to make this guy so miserable that he's finally going to leave me alone? So he sends this Jewish boy to work with the pigs, an animal that is seen as unclean under the law. He makes him feed the pigs, but he's not able to eat the food that the pigs have, and so he's starving. He's essentially enslaved and being abused in this other country. Things have not worked out well for the younger son. Verse 17. When he had come to his senses, he said, how many of my father's hired servants have food to spare? And here I am starving to death. I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. So he got up and went to his father. How many of us have rehearsed our apologies to our parents in our heads before we go? A few times, right? London, yes, you have. Yeah, I've done it. I'm like, okay, it's an hour past curfew. What is my excuse? What are they going to go for? What's the truth? And what do I actually say? I never lied to my parents, ever. And so he's walking back. So what's interesting is that now he left a rich son, putting on airs, leaving this place behind him. He comes back now, a runaway slave. Bloody feet, smelling like pigs, which is not a good smell. And you know his buddy that's trying to get rid of him is not letting him shower in the house. So he's coming back home completely in shambles. And on the way, he's thinking, what do I say to my dad? What do I say to my dad? So he comes up with a plan. I will tell him, I know I'm no longer worthy to be your son. I told you to die and all that stuff. But can I just work for you? You've always treated your servants so well. I just want to work. I'll be out back. You don't even have to see me. Here comes another incredible twist in the story that would have stunned this first century audience. So he got up and went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. So here's the son thinking, okay, I'm walking back, and where they were in this setup, they were on the hilltop. He had to walk through the town, and everybody in this village would have known what happened. They would have known this kid left. He took his inheritance. He disgraced his father. He left rich and full of himself. And so when he comes back, he's going to be humiliated walking through that town again as everyone hurls insults and makes fun of him, and worse for what he did to his family and the shame he brought to his father. But he didn't care. He had to do it. He's like, I'm starving. I have to come home. He repented by coming home. And in my mind, I'm always thinking, boy, as he got up to the house, went through the gauntlet of people saying horrible things, and then gets to the front door and knocks. Is like, listen, please. The door opens a little bit with the chain there. What do you want? Just let me talk to my dad. I promise you, I don't even want to come in. Just let me. I don't know if he's going to see you. Shut it. No, he doesn't want, like we're playing out realistic scenarios of like how, after what he did, who would ever talk to him again? But what actually happened was very different. As he's walking up, it says that his father saw him a long way off. Now, does that sound like a coincidence? Like his dad was just walking outside, stretching with his cup of coffee? Or does it seem to you like it does to me that maybe his dad spent a lot of time looking for his son, longing for his return? This is his son. This is his child. This is his baby boy who is left. I think every day he went outside looking for his son, longing for the day that he would return. And when he sees him, does he run inside and pretend to be angry? Oh, I got to get my mean face on. Remember, Joseph did that in Genesis. If you remember the story of Joseph, his brothers came in, they didn't recognize him, and he pretended to be really mad at them. That's not what the father does. In fact, the father does something crazy. In the Middle East in this time, older men did not run at all. I think I was born 2,000 years too late, because I live that lifestyle now. They didn't run. That was not the thing to do at all. In fact, the slower you walked, the more distinguished you were. All right, so what does the dad do? It says the dad saw him and ran. Now, even today, a full-grown man running through an airport or running through a mall or running at a school, it makes us all nervous. It's still jarring, unless you're wearing the full gear and you look like you're supposed to be running. Even when I run in full gear, people are still jarred by the sight. They're like, dude, just keep it inside until you get a little bit shapelier or less shapely. I don't know. Dad bod. I like that term, but I still think I'm like grandpa bod or great grandpa. Anyway. So he runs, he pulls up his robes, and he runs as fast as he can. Why? This was humiliating. The father was willing to humiliate himself so that his son wouldn't have to face humiliation walking through the crowd. The father took on his humiliation to spare the son from the humiliation that he deserved for what he had done. Isn't that beautiful? He says, I'll take the shame so that you don't have to take any more. And what does he do when he gets there? It's amazing. He threw his arms around him and he kissed him. So he doesn't even get to him and go, do you have something to say to me? No, he jumps into his arms and wraps his arms around his neck and he kisses him on his cheeks. Now this, to the watching community who would have gathered by now, they would have been like, that kissing meant forgiveness and reconciliation. The father led with forgiveness. The father led with grace. And what does the son do? His dad's kissing him and hugging him. He's thinking, brr, brr, this is not what I was expecting. Brr, brr, like he's trying to recompute what he's going to do. And he says, the son said to his father, Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Now, if you remember his speech, he has a lot more he wants to say. It's like the father cuts him off and just says, that's enough. And the servants who are behind him, listen to what the father tells them to do. The father said to his servants, quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Guess whose robe that would have been in his household? His. He says, get my very best ornate robe and put it on my disgustingly dirty son. And he says, get my ring and put it on his finger. And put sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate, for this son of mine was dead and he's alive again. He was lost and is found. And so they began to celebrate. Nobody saw that coming. I don't see that coming. That is a perfect father. That is grace. I love this quote. There's a quote that says, grace is the face love wears when it meets imperfection. Grace is the face that love wears when it meets imperfection. there was nothing the son could do about where he was in life. He just came to his dad to beg for a job. His dad stops him cold and shows him unbelievable grace and love. You want to talk about unconditional love? That's it. That is unconditional love. That son violated every condition of sonship, and yet the father took him back and said, put the robe back on him, put the ring back on him, give him his authority back, and put the shoes back on him. He is not a servant. He is my son. In fact, we're going to take our most valuable possession in our entire farm, and we're going to kill the fattened calf, which would feed 200 people. Okay, this wasn't like buying a hindquarter of beef and putting it in your deep freezer for the entire summer. This had to be eaten within 3 hours. So 200 people from the town, the very same town that was ready to jeer and mock this kid, the father says, let's throw a party, and guess who the guest of honor is going to be? My son, whom I love. And he says, we're going to celebrate. He throws a party. In fact, in the earlier parables said in Luke 15, twice Jesus says, all of heaven rejoices when one sinner comes home. All of heaven rejoices when just one lost son or daughter comes home. That's the heart of God. It's when you come back home, there's a celebration and a party. There's not, why did you do this? How dare you do this? Do you know how much you hurt me? Do you know how much you hurt this family? How many of us have heard that before? Don't raise your hand. And that's the end of the story. Wouldn't that be great if that was the end of it? It's not the end. We don't know what the other brother's thinking. Here we go. The music is playing. When the music played, so you got to imagine now, 200 people, only adults, kids were outside. Sorry, kids, some things never change. They're eating steak. There's music, there's dancing, and this party would have started right as men were coming off the fields. And they would know there's a party and we're invited. They would hear this dancing and singing, and so somebody else hears it. Verse 25, meanwhile, the older son was in the field. When he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of the servants, actually, better translation would be one of the little boys who was stuck outside while his parents partied. He said to the little boy, what was going on? Your brother has come, he replied, and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound. Now, don't you want the brother to go, yes, I've been praying for him. I didn't know if he was dead or alive. My goodness, my brother's okay. He's home. I'm going to kill him, but I love him. But the older brother became angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never even gave me a young goat so I can celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who has squandered your property with prostitutes, comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him? Now, in 21st century America, that feels like a pretty teeny bopper teenager thing to say to a parent. No offense to the Gen Zers or whatever you are here. We hear this kind of speech, and it's still kind of shocking, but we've heard it before, and it's a little intense, and we work through it. But in this time, in this culture, for the older brother to talk like that to his dad, in the audience that's listening to this, they're viewing as the lost son who went and squandered the wealth and the lost son who never left. The offense of the second son of the older brother was just as bad. He dishonored and shamed his dad. Why? Because he's standing right outside the party. And the older brother had an expected job to do. He should have heard the music, come running in, and jump into the role of head roast master, of maitre d'. The elder brother should have been running the show and telling the servants where to go. That was his role, and he refused to go in because he was angry at his dad. So his dad comes outside to plead with him in front of everyone. The shame that this would bring on this dad was unimaginable in that culture. And he's arguing. And you could hear his resentment and his anger. He's saying, I've never left. Look, I've been slaving for you. You've never once even given me a small little goat to have a party with my friends. But this son of yours comes back, and you kill the fattened calf, and you throw a huge party. And he blew all your inheritance. In fact, what he says there is he blew your future retirement funds on wild living. So the older brother's already moved on. He's already estranged from the family. Notice how he doesn't say my brother, he says your son. Notice how he doesn't say, I would love to have a goat that we could share together as a family. He goes, I want a goat so I can be with my friends, my real community. The older brother never left physically, but he was gone. His heart was gone. He was wearing a mask. But still, look at the father's response. The father says, my son, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. By the way, when he says my son there, he's using a special word for son that's not used anywhere else in this story but here. And this word for son's like my sweet little boy, my little buddy. This is a beautiful, emotional, tender word he used. So even though his older brother, this older son, is being so rude and so mean and so completely out of line, the father is still speaking to him in loving, gentle, tender terms. The father is still offering grace to his son, even as his son is spewing anger and hate and resentment at him. You were always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours, I like that. He's like, he's your brother, was dead and is alive again. He was lost, and he is found. And that's how Jesus ends the story. Don't you love movies where the ending is like not clear? My wife would be like, oh, come on. I wish I hadn't watched that ending. But the whole movie's ruined now. Jesus leaves it open. We don't know what's going to happen. Is the older brother going to make up with his dad and go in? Is the younger brother going to make good on his promise to trust his dad? There's so many questions we have. Jesus leaves it up to the audience to say, what do you think happens? Because Jesus wants us to find ourselves in that story. The older brother, so angry, so resentful, wearing a mask, going through the motions of serving his father. I don't know what this motion is. This is some farming thing. You can tell I've got a strong outdoor work history. This is a thing, right? He's working in the fields for his dad, but again, he calls himself a slave. Isn't it interesting that one son leaves and becomes a slave? The other son doesn't leave, but feels like a slave. You've got two lost sons, and the dad shows grace and love to both of them because he is a perfect father. In fact, what's interesting is this story is called the prodigal son. But you know what's interesting is the word prodigal doesn't mean what I thought it meant. I thought prodigal was like the black sheep, wild, crazy, just uncontrollable. Prodigal actually means extravagantly generous, lavishly wasteful, and reckless. So really, this shouldn't be called the prodigal son story. This should be called the prodigal father story. Because his love and grace was so lavish, was so generous, was so over the top, you could even say it was reckless. He did not care what the son had done. He just wanted him to come home. The prodigal father. His grace and love are not stopped by his son's actions. The father was willing to be humiliated by both of his sons. The second humiliation was as bad as the first. Why? Because he loves his sons unconditionally. He says to the younger son, there's nothing you can do to make me love you less. No matter how far you've run, no matter how much you've hurt me, no matter how much you've sinned, no matter the mistakes you've made, there's nothing you can do to make me love you less. I love you completely. Don't see that mound of sin and shame and mistakes as something that keeps us apart. Come to me, come home to me. I want you back. And then the father says to the older brother, there's nothing you can do to make me love you more. You don't need to work harder. You don't need to try harder. Just rest in my love and trust that I love you and that you're my son. So who are you in this story? Who are you today? Maybe you're the younger son and you have run far from God. You have scorched the earth of relationships and you've made huge mistakes and you've done really bad things. And you're thinking, there's no way I can come home. There's no way. There's no way I can be forgiven. There's no way I can come back. God says, come home. Trust God's grace is greater than all of your sin. He says, come home. Please don't wait till you've got your life figured out. The younger son, don't wait until the famine ends and you get a job and you've got a family and you've got money. Then come home and honor. No, come home a broke, bloody, dirty slave and I will restore you. Don't get your life cleaned up. Come to Jesus right now. He wants you. The perfect father wants relationship with you. Or are you the second son? Are you the older brother? Are you wearing a mask? Are you just going through the motions? But inside you've got resentment. Inside you've got pain. Inside you've got hurt. Inside you've been like, God, why did you allow this to happen? Why did you take them? Why did they go through this? God, why did I lose this? Why are you punishing me? God, why don't you love me? But on the outside, the mask is on and you are slaving away in the fields, doing what you're supposed to do, but inside you are angry. The offer of grace is the same. God's offer to you is the same. Come home. Come home. You may have never left physically, but your heart is far away. The offer is to come home. Will you come home? The love of God is gracious. The love of God is greater than all of our sin. And I love the image. If you get nothing else from today, I want to leave you with the image of a perfect father looking for you. A perfect father waiting for you to come home. A perfect father. All of the stuff that we went through with our own dads, all the good and the bad and the ugly, God chose this term because he wants to be your perfect father forever, to love you unconditionally. He's not going to love you more when you win. He's not going to love you less when you make a mistake. He loves you fully, and he wants you to come home. Will you come home today to the prodigal father whose love is extravagant, whose love is over the top, whose love is even reckless? He loves you. God, I thank you for this truth. I thank you that you pursue us and you love us, that we can't hide, that you will never stop looking and waiting for us, and that your arms are open wide to us, that when we turn and come back, you are there with us and you want us to come to you. I pray even now for that one in this audience, that one who's sitting here watching online, the one who's in the room. God, I pray even now that they would have the courage to trust your grace, to trust in your unconditional love for them, to trust that you are a perfect father who ushers us home, and that we can live in that relationship. I pray for the younger and the older brother in the room, God, that they would find the courage to just throw themselves into your arms, trusting in your grace and love to hold us and to give us a life beyond our imagination. Thank you for this truth. Thank you for this story. And I pray now as we sing this song that we would celebrate the love you have for us that is truly extravagant. You are our prodigal God, and I thank you for that truth. In Jesus' name, amen.
If you're able, I'm going to invite you to come stand and worship with us.
Spoke a word, you were singing over me. You been so, so good to me. Before I took a breath, you breathed your life in me. And you have been so, so kind to me. And all the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. And I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it. Still you give yourself away. And all the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. When I was your foe, still your love fought me. And you have been so, so good to me. When I felt no worth, you paid it all for me. And you have been so, so kind to me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. And I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it. Still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, you're coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. No shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. Yeah. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. Oh, there's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, you're coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it. Still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. And oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. And I couldn't earn it, and I don't deserve it. Still you give yourself away. And all the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God.
Sometimes on this journey, I get lost in my mistakes. What looks to me like weakness is a canvas for your strength. My story isn't over, my story's just begun. And failure won't define me, 'cause that's what my Father does. No, failure won't define me, 'cause that's what my Father does. Ooh, lay your burdens down. Ooh, here in the Father's house. Check your shame at the door, 'cause it ain't welcome anymore. Ooh, you're in the Father's house. The Bible's not the end game, the journey's just the start. 'Cause you never wanted perfect, you just wanted my heart. My story isn't over if the story isn't good, 'cause failure's never final when the Father's in the room. No, failure's never final when the Father's in the room. Lay your burdens down. Ooh, here in the Father's check your shame. Check your shame at the door, 'cause it ain't welcome anymore. Ooh, you're in the Father's house. Prodigals come home, the hopeless find hope. Love is on the move when the Father's in the room. Prison doors fling wide, the dead come to life. Love is on the move when the Father's in the room. Miracles take place, the cynical find faith. Love is breaking through when the Father's in the room. Jericho walls are quaking, strongholds now are shaking. Love is breaking through when the Father's in the room. Oh, love is breaking through when the Father's in the room. Lay your burdens down. You're in the Father. Check your shame.
What an incredible finish to this amazing story. And before we all go, I just want to leave you with one thought about the love of God, our perfect Father. There are moments in our life where we feel like we've made mistakes, and moments we feel like we're struggling, but I just want to encourage you from Romans chapter 8, just how secure the love of God is for each one of us as you leave today. Listen to these words. Who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Shall tribulation or distress or persecution or famine or nakedness or danger or sword? No, in all these things we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. For I am sure that neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor rulers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor powers, nor height, nor depth, nor anything else in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus our Lord. The love that God has for you is unbreakable and unshakable, and he calls to you today, come home, experience the grace and love that he has for you. If you're the younger brother, come back. If you're the older brother, take off the mask. There's grace for both. Thank you for being with us today. Have an incredible week. Come back next week for the next part of our series, family. Thanks for being with us.